All right, welcome back everybody to a brand new episode on the Just Music Podcast. Really looking forward to this episode because we have 4 special guests on here today, a couple good friends of mine, and we're going to be talking all about all kinds of different music topics in this week's episode on the Just Music Podcast. The boys, D-A-B-O-Y-S, the boys, now join in progress. All right, everybody, welcome back to the Just Music Podcast. Got a super awesome special episode this week. We are interviewing the boys. Yeah, the boys. This is a group of guys that we all started kind of jamming together with here not that long ago. We were all in a rock band ensemble class, and unfortunately it got cut due to COVID-19, so we didn't actually get to have any performances, but I'm so super glad to have them on the Just Music Podcast. We have a lot of awesome subject matter that we're going to be talking about on this episode. But before we get into those list of questions, I'd like to give a little bit of introduction for everybody that's on it today and give them a little backstory about who they are. So I'd like to start with Greg, who's in our left top corner here. Beaumont Livingston is his title.
On that?
Yeah.
From a different thing. Okay, so yeah, my name is Greg Dagner. I've been playing music all my life, really. I mean, I wouldn't describe my parents as like musical or being from a musical family, but for some reason, we've always had a guitar or some other musical instrument around the house. So me, my brother, and my sister are all musicians to some degree. Started playing drums when I was about 10. That's like my main thing. But over the years, you know, many years, I've picked up a little bit of it all, gigging and stuff. So, you know, in the ensemble you mentioned, I mostly play guitar and bass. I think it's probably Erik's fault because he's, you know, a drummer as well. But those are like the things, and I, you know, like playing music, listening to music, favorite thing to do. So glad to be here.
Yeah, good. Welcome to the program. And Erik Schultz, he is a familiar face. We've had him on here before. So Erik, give a little intro about yourself.
Yeah, grew up in the area. I went to Okemos High School. There I started doing drums, and before that I did choir. So I guess I would mostly consider myself a vocalist. And then in the past couple of years, since I started going to LCC, also started learning guitar, getting back into bass. As for a musical background, my dad was a drummer, you know, drum captain of the drum line. And then my mom was in theater and was a dancer. So I guess that's where I sort of get like my rhythm and my musical instinct from. But yeah, that's pretty much it for me.
Good deal. I'm glad to have you back on the program with the boys.
Good to be back with the boys,
Yeah.
man.
All right. So next we have Sharky, Ben. He is also kind of the youngest one of the bunch here. He's a super cool cat. So Ben, why don't you give us a little introduction about yourself?
Let's see where to start. Well, I'm Ben. I play bass and guitar, mainly guitar. I've been playing guitar for about since freshman year, and I think I started taking it more seriously around like sophomore year, and then I played bass for about 4 or 5 years, I'd say. So yeah, that's about it.
Good deal. Well, welcome, Ben. And then lastly, in the top right-hand corner, Mr. Jake. I'm digging that poster you got in the background there.
Thank you. Yeah, dude, isn't that sick? I got that for Christmas. Yeah, so I'm Jake. My story, I've been playing music forever. I come from also a pretty musical family. My dad was in rock bands all throughout the 80s, so there was just always guitars and music around when I was a kid. Got my first drum set when I was 7. Started playing in band in school, all through schools and percussion. And then, yeah, so I basically spent my life playing drums, and after I graduated, I'm like, screw that, I'm playing guitar now. And so that's what I've been working on. And yeah, now I'm just out here studying a little bit, playing some guitar. Met you guys, and feeling good.
Yeah, good deal. So I should mention, again, kind of like we touched base on already, we all kind of actually met. We were all taking a rock band ensemble class, and we kind of all started, kind of chit-chatting that way. And we actually started to kind of get invested in one another's musical taste, where we were trying to get together kind of a band and a project. And we have a group chat that we use quite a bit. Not only do we talk about music, but we talk about all kinds of other subject matters. But yeah, it's pretty cool how we all started here, other than the fact that, again, the whole virus situation kind of screwed us in that regard. But anyway, yeah, super cool. Bunch of awesome guys to have on the program. So let's get into some questions here. So we already kind of talked about everybody's kind of storyline and their, kind of come to music kind of situation. But I want to kind of go in depth a little bit more about, what was your coming to, music regard? I mean, like for some people, it's always like a certain artist or, and I know we kind of all have our similarities in what kind of, artists and genres that we like. But let's start with you, Greg. And then you guys, again, feel free to kind of interject whenever you want and talk about that. And, just kind of talk about, when, what was it that, your big experience that was like, yes, I got to learn how to play music. I want to do that.
Yeah, so like I said, I mean, I've always loved music, even as like a little tot, like I remember my parents' music, which, I was born in 1983. So I was listening to like a lot of 80s pop and of course, hair metal. My older cousins, were into that. So those are like, that was like my first, like, I would say like exposure to music. When I got into playing music, 10 years old, 5th grade, I come from like a really small conservative farming town in mid-Michigan called Williamston. And it was like a Footloose moment because this kid came to town, long hair, Guns N' Roses shirt. He played guitar. It was like the Seattle grunge scene of the early 90s. And like, I loved Nirvana, and and he was like, get some drums, let's be in a band. And I literally remember, I was like in karate at the time, and drums were like, the drums I wanted were $400. My dad was like, you can test for your red belt or you can get a drum set. And I was like, so I got drums, and then the rest is history. My brother got a bass at the same time. He was in this band, a bunch of like preteen kids playing Nirvana covers. You know what I mean? That was it.
Yeah, you like never looked back at that red belt for karate ever again.
I never.
He still can't fight to this day.
I haven't gotten in a single fight since. So.
Oh, this is pacifist.
He played a lot of
now.
drums. So.
All right, go ahead, Erik.
Yeah, I think the first music that I ever really started loving is whenever I would be going on my way to school in the car, my parents would play Def Leppard. And so Def Leppard was like, Def Leppard was like my first band that I got exposure to. But then I think if there was a specific album that made me at least want to be like a vocalist, was That's the Spirit by Bring Me the Horizon, because it was the first time that I ever heard such a variety of clean vocals with like falsettos and also harsh scream vocals. Like it was just everything in one, and that just made me realize I would love to be like that diverse with my capabilities as a vocalist.
Sure.
So.
Yeah.
Erik, did you ever have the thought like if I'm not like putting my vocal cords on the line, like the health of them for my art, and I'm not doing something right?
I think so. I think if I couldn't at least damage my vocal cords a little bit when performing, I think I wasn't getting the job done. You gotta sacrifice. You gotta sacrifice big.
See, that's what hit me when I first heard Janis Joplin, because she was just up there like screeching, crying on stage. I'm like, oh damn, that's the kind of feeling that it's almost like past rock at that point, because it's just like you're just seeing a human be a human, and that's the stuff that gets me into it. It's just like when it gets so expressive, like you're blurring the line between like a music and a theater, and like just being
that
up
raw
there showing
energy
people.
and passion, right? Yeah.
What about you, Ben?
Well, I come from like a pretty straight rock and roll and metal background. For me, my first artist that I discovered was Linkin Park, and then like Ozzy Osbourne when I was like 8 years old. I was like, oh shit, I got like this, like I've struck the gold, like the mother right here. And then what made me want to pick up a guitar was seeing 3 Days Grace live.
Oh, yeah.
And that was like a pretty cool experience because I got to meet them. That was like my first concert, right? And then when I saw that same year later, when I saw Black Sabbath live on the End tour, I was like, okay, now I want to be in a band and play live and like put everything out, like I have towards this.
Good deal.
Nice.
I'd like to note that I can't remember who it was, but there was 2 different bands. Well, long story short, when Common Ground, before it was like a rap fest and a country fest, and Common Ground had, dare I say, good music, but a more lineup that we kind of all gravitate towards. There was a band, and I don't think they really make music anymore, but I'm pretty sure it was like 3 Days Grace and Hinder was a part of this tour for Common Ground. And I remember I was probably like, I don't know, like 10 or 11. And that was like the first time that I witnessed like bras being thrown on stage. And I was like, whatever, like 10 or 11 years old. And I was like, what's going on here? And, at 10 or 11 years old, you're not really like putting 2 and 2 together. Like what's going on? But I was just like, okay, what does
I
that
want
mean?
that job. Yeah.
Like, what does that mean? Right. But yeah, I thought I'd add that in there. So Jake, what about you?
Oh yeah. Well, yeah. Like I was saying, like my dad played in a rock band forever. So when I was a kid, he was like in like a dad band, just kind of like bar band, some like just like 30, 40-year-old dudes.
Mm-hmm.
And so all the music on my computer was just like whatever they were covering.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of, just a lot of the classic like hits, like they're just the good bar songs. Trying to think back because it's so long ago now. But like Styx is one of my first like favorite. Like that was the first band that I like as a kid. Like I feel like I could identify with. I'm like, oh, these are my guys. Like Styx, that's my group. And then I think Rush was a big one for me because I was a drummer. So Neil Peart was that guy's an alien. Like oh my God, rest in peace.
R.I.P.
Oh.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, no tears today. Yeah.
Well, this is good. We have keep those in the back of your mind because I have some questions that I think you're really gonna like based on some of those answers here. Okay, so try to get into the list of questions here. So and this is kind of a hard thing to define, right? But I know amongst our group chat that we've kind of had some disagreements and some agreements, and what we define as what we think is a good and what is a great musician. So I want you guys to kind of like, kind of banter back and forth a little bit of what you think defines a good musician, because there are arguably really, really talented, good musicians out there. But when I think of a great musician, there's always somebody in that higher tier, right? So when you're thinking about that, if you were to try to like, write that out on paper and say, okay, what is the definition of a good and a great musician? What do you think that would be?
Ben, you want to kick us off?
Yeah, give me a second. I'll go second.
Oh yeah, okay.
Wait, I thought you might ask this question, and so I prepared an answer, and I would love to go first.
Oh, perfect.
This for me is like a really good point of contention because for me there are like 2 lines, and the intersection of those lines is where like most of my favorite musicians lie. And that line is like, a certain like technical ability, whether it's like a good knowledge of theory or just like finger dexterity and like like technical adroitness, but then also like I want to see your soul too, like whether or not you're a songwriter or whether you're just a musician, like lyrically or like stylistically, like I want to see like what makes you tick. I want to see like darkness sometimes, but I also want to see like, for me, music is one of the few things in my like old cynical age that I still have like a visceral reaction to when I hear what to me is good music. And like when I get goosebumps or like when I feel something, like, that is like, I want to see those 2 lines in that area in between them. I want to see like an artist or like a band in that area.
Well, I like how when you're demonstrating the 2 lines, it's more down here. It's not up here or like there or anything. Because I feel like I know what you're kind of like. Because those musicians, there's all the people that are just like technically perfect. Like every finger's in the right spot, everything is on the meter. It's perfect. But a lot of times you're sacrificing some of that feel for that. And there are players that can do both. There are those. I'm not gonna name names because I don't want to start any fights, but yeah, but there are people that can do both. But when you're doing your fingers, you had it down here more, and I feel like around there is where that golden money spot usually is.
Yeah, that was my visual aid for the day, by the way.
No, that's actually really helpful to like kind of give me something to feel out this conversation because, like you said, it's a really hard, abstract thing to talk about. So you kind of need to get a little symbolic with it.
Right. Yeah. Erik, Ben.
Eric, I know you have thoughts.
I know he's itching to say something.
I don't know, because I over the years, I think with all the music that I've heard and sort of looked into, I don't want to sound full of myself and be like, oh, I've moved past the labels of good and bad music, but I think in a way I have, where it's just I don't know if it's music that I don't think is good. I don't think that it's objectively bad. It's just not what I like. But I guess for me, my philosophy, at least in my old band, A Daydream Away, when I was the drummer, my philosophy for making my drum parts was how much can I do without derailing the whole song, and also how can I make this song, at least drum wise, feel completely different from the other songs. So I would try and not try and use the same rhythm twice, and I would try and use different parts of the drums at different times. And I was always trying to be creative and new without being too wild. It was I tried to get that sweet money spot of impressive but not too full of myself on the drums.
Showy.
Not too showy, but I also add like some fills here and there that maybe other people wouldn't put there, but so long as it didn't get in the way of the guitar or the bass or the vocals, it was pretty good. And you also got to play off of your other members. I would always it's funny, I was arguing with you about John Bonham, but one thing that him and I share is that I was actually playing more toward the guitar than the bass.
Right.
I was trying to sync up with
weird, right?
Yeah. So I guess props to John Bonham in that case.
Ben, you got any thoughts yet?
Yeah, I'd say for me, what separates the men from the boys is going to back to what Greg said, but like having that technicality, but also having that soul and feel as well. And for me, I actually talked about this with this one band that I saw a while ago about like you don't have to like create a whole new genre in order to be a great musician. As long as like you're making music that's like good, that sounds good to you, then that's also like that's what's important, really.
Yeah, I agree with that. So I want to conjure up this idea here, just because I like kind of stirring the waters a little bit and seeing what everybody's input is on this. But when I kind of look at and I hate using definitions and I hate using defining what is good and great, because for me, music is an expressive art form, and for me, there should be no labels or boundaries on it. If you're a singer-songwriter and you like strumming on chords and singing over them, that's great. That's beautiful. You're doing it. And I think that's great. But that's why I just don't like getting all these labels. But because I like to stir water, I'm curious, because when I think of like a good musician and a great musician, I think about technicality aspects come in and the feeling and the solo is getting thing. But I always look at who I define as great, who is cross-blending several different genres. And what I mean by that is like there are arguably really, really good musicians out there that are really good at one thing, right? And so like to me, like, okay, yeah, they're really, really good at what they do, right? That's the one thing that they're good at. But for me, that next tier for me is seeing somebody who's great where it's like, what is this thing that this person can't play or can't do? One person that I bring to mind a lot who just blows my mind is Pat Metheny. I think we always think about all these guitar players about, oh, they can do this and they can do that. You think of like Steve Vai, Eddie Van Halen, Joe Satriani, all these cats, right? And then it's like when I think of like Pat Metheny, it's like I've seen these concerts of him and he's just like, holy crap, like the first 30 minutes is like this fusion jazz, and then the next stuff it's like classical, and then it's just like country, and then it's pop, and then it's just like this dude just plays everything. And for me, that's what I think to be as like a great musician is like, okay, like let's say we take Jimi Hendrix or whatever, which is obviously a fantastic musician. He's great, but he was really just kind of rooted only in the blues. And I'm not taking anything away from him, but you look at like Pat Metheny, where it's like this dude literally plays it all, and that's where my question, if I can kind of conjure up this idea about, do you think defining it to be a great musician is to be able to be versed in as many different stylings and subgenres of music, opposed to just being a good musician and being strong in one specific area?
That's like it's like such a thick question. And it depends, because so like those lines I described, I know people who like personally and like famous musicians who are not like what I would call like very technically skilled, but they make up for it by being just like all hard in. And then there are people who are really just technically adroit, but they're just like live musicians for like, you know, like a touring pop star or something, but they've like become renowned because of that. You know, like a real working musician, like, you know, like it would be sweet if I was like a famous studio musician, you know what I mean? But like the example you use, if you're like, I think you sort of have to be really versatile if you're like specifically like a famous guitar player who of course has been in bands and stuff, but now like you just kind of like tour around because people come to see you because they know you're good. Yeah, you definitely like your show, your stage show or like whatever you do has to have that little extra like feather in its cap of you being like, guess what? Now I'm going to do this shit and blow your mind again. Melt your face a little bit more.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, that quality of like versatility, that's what has been attracting me this last like month or two. Basically, the Doors have been my quarantine band, and because they go all over the place. Like they have songs that sound almost classical with just piano and Jim with his nice like warm silky voice. Yeah. And then there's like songs like I don't know if you guys know 5 to 1. It's like a deep cut, but I think he came into the recording studio just destroyed and was just screaming. And I'm like,
probably.
Yeah, And so it's that. And then, but I think performing live is big for me because like being a really good studio musician and being a very good, like, that's a talent. And being able to just like be on the money and come into work and put it in every day, like that's a skill. But something about being able to be live and like it's like, okay, like this is your try, you do it right now and whatever comes out of you, like that's the show. Right. So being a really good live musician I think is important to me, and I think that goes in with that kind of versatility because like if you had the exact same live show every time, like it'll be fine, it'll be good show, you'll probably be really practiced at it, but it's not going to give people anything new, and it's just having like a more theatrical and like really think about the whole performance and not just specifically the sound.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah. Eric, Ben?
Yeah, I guess for me, like these are all great points. And I think for me, what makes like a truly outstanding, like top of the line musician is someone who almost transcends genres. Like someone who doesn't go out with a genre in mind, someone who just plays to the song what they think would sound good in the song, not like, oh, this is a rock song, maybe I should play some like rock guitar or rock drums. But you know, maybe if it's like a pop song, they'll be like, maybe I'll do some like sick palm muted like death metal sounds that might sound good here, I don't know. Or like I would use a double bass pedal on the singer-songwriter songs of my old band, and people would be like, why would you use a double bass pedal? And I'd be like, I don't know, because I could, and I thought it sounded nice in the time, so I don't know.
Yeah, before we get to you, Ben, I just want to add, Eric, that's a good point because it's like you talk about like transcending genres. So like based on that, if I can retract my statement, then it's like, okay, well, Jimi Hendrix obviously transcended guitar music, right? I mean, come on. It was like, oh, the Hendrix chord, right? Oh, you want to play the Hendrix major chord, right? The Hendrix sharp 9 chord, right? I mean, those are obviously things that he left as an impact in a whole upcoming generation, in our generation, and several generations to come. So with that in mind, also, it's kind of like you'd obviously define him as great, even though he may be kind of categorized in one specific sub-genre or type of music. But anyway, just wanted to add that in there. So Ben, what about you, or what's your input on that?
I guess for me, versatility, you don't have to be like a super versatile musician for me to like want to listen to it, but it definitely elevates you more, in my opinion. So like I'd say a great example of that is Mike Shinoda from Linkin Park, because you see he can write songs of any genre, really, whether it's he can write a really good rock and hard rock or metal song, and he can also write a really good hip hop and pop song as well, and he can blend them as well. And I think that's a really good what was that?
It looks like your cat went in the background there. Fish out of water. Yeah, I totally agree with that. Yeah, I mean, I remember like listening to Linkin Park in my middle school days, and I was like, whoa, this was definitely like one of those like types of bands of that group where it's like you can't really categorize them in one specific type of music. And I like music like that because there are certain bands where it's like, for example, Tool obviously just had a new album come out not that long ago. You listen to that album and it's just like, okay, yeah, I could see it be considered rock. I can see it be considered experimental. And it's like, it's all these different cultural blends. And it's just like, what do you call it? And music like that to me, which is really like thought provoking and really makes you think about it is what I kind of gravitate towards too, because it's like, well, what do you call this? Because there's just,
Tool.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what I was thinking. It's a Tool.
Yeah, exactly.
Like the Beatles.
Yeah, Beatles are a great example too. It's like every single album is different, you know. It's not like there is obviously some repetitious type motifs in their music, but a lot of musicians, it's just like every single album is like, it's always kind of different, you know.
Yeah,
Okay.
like you don't say the Beatles are this kind of band. You say the Beatles are the Beatles.
The Beatles, yeah, exactly. It kind of transcend this whole idea of, it sounds like the Beatles. That band kind of reminds me of the Beatles, right? And now it's almost like when you listen to the Beatles, you're like, oh, the Beatles is like a genre of music.
Right.
Yeah, they don't remind me of the Beatles sometimes. Like,
yeah, exactly. Yeah. So this leads me into a really good question, because when I was coming up with questions of of topic and discussion, I was like, oh, this would be a really, really good one. So if you could build your dream band, right? And it can be any single musician from any cultural era, any band, timelines of life don't matter. You can build your guitarists. You can have as many band members in there as you like, I would say. I know it's a tough question, right? So I want you to build your dream band. So pick, your favorite guitarist, your favorite drummer, your bassist, etc., and kind of explain how you have arrived to that decision as well. And we'll start with you, Greg, if you are ready for that undertaking of a question.
I mean, this is gonna be like, there is no like proper way to address this, especially as a group, because as soon as I'm done, someone's gonna, like, the first name that comes out of Erik's mouth, I'm gonna be like,
oh, I should have chose that one.
Are we allowed to swear on this? I'm gonna be like, F,
Yeah, keep it PG.
Yeah, there are oh my God. Okay, so I'm just gonna go with like where I am right now.
Okay.
I'm looking at my RHCP poster in the background. I'm gonna say Lee is my bass player, right?
Okay.
I don't know what kind of band this is gonna be though.
Doesn't matter.
Stage presence.
Talking about transcending genres, dude.
Yeah.
It's gotta be Flea with Les Claypool, 2 basses. I'm gonna do that. All right. My drummer. Ooh, dude. This is impossible.
If you want more time to think about
Yeah,
that,
if you want to come
anecdote
can we go to someone else?
when you said 2 basses, it made me think of an old band I had in high school, where we were sort of like this, almost like a I don't know, like rap rock underground garage sort of deal, and we had 2 bass players, and we thought that was really cool. So you just made me think of that. I don't know.
Are either of those bass players going to be in your super group? Because that's what we're talking about, right?
I'm just trying to say that you're not the first person to think of 2 basses, bro.
Damn.
Okay.
There are actually 2 bass players, like I think on like a stand-up tour at some point.
Yeah.
It really worked.
Yeah.
They also wore one sock.
Yeah, you might have like a 4-string bassist and then like a 6-string bassist and whatever to get the higher ends, but they're still low. I've seen that before. Like Modest Mouse. I don't know if you guys have like watched any Modest Mouse stuff, but Modest Mouse is like, they're so like, but beyond them being super eccentric on the surface, like when they have like concerts, they have like a ridiculous amount of people on stage. They'll have like 5 guitar players going in at the same time, and then like two or three drummers at the same. Yeah, exactly. It's just like, what in the heck is going on? But
I think I figured out my group.
okay, let's hear it.
Okay, because I'm partial to as a juxtaposed to that, like a smaller, like a 4-piece is, it feels so nice. The idea of just having like three musicians and a singer, like 3 instrumentalists and a singer, and just like having a full big sound come out of that is what I'm looking for. And what I thought about mainly when putting this together is people that I think could vibe very well together and work off and kind of swim with each other. So for my guitar player,
Sorry.
for my guitar player, I was like, having a hard time coming up with it, but I think I think I want Keith Richards.
Oh yeah.
Because he talks
Okay.
him and Actually, I'll tell you my whole list first. I'll tell you what. So I got Keith Richards on guitar, Victor Wooten on bass, John Bonham on the drums, and then Jim Morrison singing.
Okay.
And so here's where that came from. So Keith, I picked for guitar because he talks about him and Brian. What was our OG Stones guitarist? Brian. They talk about this technique they call the ancient art of weaving, which is where neither of you are really playing lead or rhythm, and you're just kind of moving in and out of each other. And that's always like, I feel like if you can get to that level of synergy with someone, you've like mastered your own control and your ability to listen and your feeling to pick up vibes. Like that's you're working on something when you're talking about transcending stuff. Because I feel like that can just, it's almost like neither of you are playing. It's like there's some third factor that you are both adhering to that's bringing it out. Now I'm almost going to put another person in here because I need someone else for him to weave with.
Well, let me speak on that. So I'm not a huge Stones fan, but I can definitely appreciate their music, and I do like a good majority of their music. But it's funny that you mentioned that because Keith Richards is like that type of guitar player where you'll be in like playing a song or whatever, and you're like, no, you got to play it like Keith Richards does, and you're like, well, what does that mean? And it's like literally riding this kind of wave between what's lead and what's rhythm and blending it together. And I will say Keith Richards is, I think in that regard, Keith Richards is kind of an underrated guitar player because I don't think he is respected in that regard because it's like when he does play, it's like, yeah, it's rhythm, but he's also playing lead like at the same time.
Yeah, he's a less is more kind of guy.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I like that. Yeah, that's really respectable. I could see him being in my group.
I had him with Victor Wooten. So Victor Wooten just funky vibing all over. Like this would definitely be a very fusion band because I don't even know what they would turn out, but that's just where it felt.
Right. So Greg, Eric, Ben, what you guys coming to a decision here yet?
I'm thinking just a bunch of metal guys right now. I think I've come up. I know my guitarist and bassist. For guitar, it's definitely Dimebag from Pantera. because like if you just look at his live stuff, it's incredible. We're talking about that you having that technicality and also having that soul and feel as well.
Sure, yeah.
I'd say Cliff Burton from Metallica. I feel like they vibe really well together. If he was still alive, that'd be awesome. That'd be an awesome collaboration. He can also he's also very technically proficient, and also it sounds like he can make it sound like a guitar, basically, like shred on it, basically. And then vocalists, I can't think of a drummer or vocalist to save my life.
That's okay. Greg, Eric?
Go with Danny Carey for drums.
I'm also going with Danny Carey for drums. I was thinking about it. I almost wanted to do Dave Grohl circa 94 because I learned to do drums like that from him, and I really respect what he's become as a musician, but I wouldn't want him to play guitar or vocals in my band. I want 94 Grohl on drums. And man, who do I want to sing vocals? Maybe Eric goes. Give me some ideas.
I don't know. A big problem is there's a lot of musicians that I love, but I don't know their names for a lot of them.
Oh, just do band.
But I would say guitarists. Whoever the lead guitarist for this band, Sean, is. I know I've showed you a couple of their songs, Justin. He is just insane.
He's so good.
Drums, it would probably be. I almost want to say Ringo, not because I think that he's like the best drummer, but just because I think he could play to whatever the rest of the guys are playing. Yeah. Like he's kind of one of those drummers where he like I was saying, he just transcends drums. He just plays whatever he thinks sounds good.
Right.
Bass player, I would definitely have Mike Kerr, who is from Royal Blood, and he's just such an interesting bass player. He doesn't play the bass like a bass. He plays it like almost like a guitar because he has so many pedals and effects running through it. Vocals. I don't know.
You can nominate yourself.
I would say, I don't know if I should nominate myself, though. I would probably say Chester Bennington, actually.
Oh, okay.
Chester Bennington, because I think he
Rest in peace.
can do whatever. He can do whatever, and he's just so good at anything he does.
I second that. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with
sure.
that. Yeah, as we were kind of mentioning earlier, Linkin Park again is like one of those bands where it's just like it's rapish, it's rockish, it's punkish, it's screamish. Like it's like, what is it? It's just, well, it's Linkin Park, you know.
It makes me want to cry sometimes, but it also makes me want to, like just
Ed Bob.
start getting it.
Yeah, right.
Wait,
You gotta.
were you done, Eric?
I think that's
Oh,
pretty
okay.
good.
Because I thought of a third drummer. I'm going with Stuart Copeland from the Police. So my band is just going to be 2 bass players and 3 drummers.
Nothing but rhythm, just rhythm.
Oh, I love it.
I'm thinking about just like vocalists who are just like sing it like, or play it like Keith Richards, or sing, like. So I'm thinking like Freddie Mercury or David Bowie.
Oh yeah.
That'd be nice.
But
They would love 2 basses.
Yeah, right. They're the
Right.
type of like go all out guys.
Probably
Yeah.
want to add the bassist from Muse. He's incredible.
That's
yeah.
my friend's
Insane.
favorite band to see live of all time.
Dude, Hysteria was the first song I ever learned on bass.
That is crazy.
Dang. Well, okay.
Challenge me.
So this
Yeah,
is
Justin, what about you?
this is interesting because I really like hearing everybody's like just basically their styling. So we have like the metal, then we have like more kind of like 90s rock kind of grunge thing, and then we have more like 70s rock, and then we have more kind of like I would say more like modern, like contemporary. It's just cool where everybody's kind of at. So for me, I don't know if you guys know. Well, you should know if you don't. Pito Palladino is an awesome bass player. I don't know if you've heard of him before. He plays in a band called the not the Grateful Dead. I think it's called what is it called? It's John Mayer's trio band, and he's the bass player for it. And where it's like their blues band, it's called, I think it's Great Dead or Grateful. I can't remember what it is, but Pito Palladino is an awesome bass player. Definitely check his stuff out. That dude is like the type of guy where it's like he never like stops shaking his head the entire time, and he's just in the groove the entire time. And it's just so cool. So I would definitely have Pito Palladino for my bass player. For my drummer, I'm kind of going for more of like an R&B soul kind of vibe. I would definitely have Questlove. I don't know if you guys know who Questlove is. He's
That's great.
Jimmy Fallon's band. And
okay, dope.
From the
Roots. From the Roots. Yeah, he does a lot of different studio work too. So he's appeared on a lot of different albums for a lot of different artists. So it would definitely be Pito Palladino, Questlove. And the guitar player part is hard because I'm also kind of thinking about like who I think is like, in the top realm of musicians nowadays. And I really like Gary Clark Jr. I think Gary Clark Jr. is like arguably one of the best guitarists of our generation in the blues rock kind of vibe.
Yeah.
If I'm thinking about really doing probably like a trio in that regard too, but I really like those guys. And the thing was with Gary too is he can sing really well too. He's got that really raunchy kind of like grungy kind of voice to him.
Can I interject a comment about Gary Clark?
Yeah.
Sure. I was actually working the other day, and I was just listening to music. I had this like a blues rock kind of the Spotify like whatever daily mix going, and like a song came on, and I just heard some really tasty just like blues licks, and I'm like, oh nice, some BB King came on, and I was listening to it a little bit, and I'm like, it's a little too much overdrive on that guitar for that to be BB King. Checked, Gary.
Yeah.
My boy.
Yeah.
Say that he is bringing blues back to like a more like single-handedly, or like there's a few blues musicians like now that are kind of like topping the charts and I feel like it's him and Joe Bonamassa
Yeah. Oh, one person that I forgot to even mention, and he's on YouTube a lot on a bunch of like True Fire like courses, and it's Josh Smith. Have you guys checked this guy out?
Yes. Oh my God.
Wow.
He has so much feel.
Yeah, he's played with Joe Bonamassa, in fact, a lot, and he's kind of in like that swing blues feel.
Mm-hmm.
And that dude is just like when I think of like blues shred, that is the guy who does it. Like he literally shreds blues. Like when I think of blues music, like there's a lot of like fast runs, and then sometimes it's like slower. I mean, he like shreds.
He'll do it on acoustic too.
Yeah, I know.
He'll move.
Josh Smith.
What's
you guys
the
should
name?
definitely.
Josh Smith.
Josh Smith.
I'm
Yeah,
going
he's
down
like
that rabbit hole later.
he is like a True Fire. I don't know if True Fire does all these different guitar like master classes and stuff, and he's a frequent on there. And he's from like he's like a Nashville guy, I think. I think that's right, isn't it, Jake? Like Nashville, I think.
Yeah, some south, yeah.
Man, dude, that dude, and he's young too. He's like in his like early 30s, and he just rips, man. It's just like sometimes his fingers move so fast. Like you never watch like a video and you're like, oh yeah, I can kind of see what they're doing. Okay, yeah, there's where he's in that position there. I mean, this, it's like
Right.
I don't even know what he's doing. He just like literally massages the neck, but like at rapid pace, man. It's so sweet. Josh Smith, definitely check him out. Okay, so that was awesome. Really cool to kind of know where everybody's kind of influences are in their biggest, their dream bands if they could build it. And really interesting about like the double bass players and that kind of stuff. That's kind of cool. Kind of experimental. I kind of like that little Frank Zappa guy over here. What?
Frank Zappa can be my guitar player.
There you go.
Oh yeah,
And background vocals, because he's also got that baritone like Jim Morrison.
Yeah, very, very cool. So I have a couple more questions here, and this is really, really cool. So if you, I know we're kind of all in the musical journey, and we all have our influence and things, but like if you were not a musician and you weren't actively creating music on a daily, what would be your other pursuit? Like if you were to say like, oh, if I wasn't a musician, I would be this instead. What would that be and why? I'm curious.
I'd probably either be a chef or a martial arts instructor.
I could see that all the way.
Shit, yeah.
I could see Ben with like one of those like sushi chef mustaches.
Oh my God, grow it, please, please.
Like with his little chopsticks. Like I'm not trying to stereotype here, but I could see that.
We all grow one right now.
Oh my God, I want it.
Please.
Okay. Did you have your mind made up, Greg? It looked like you're pointing to yourself.
Was I?
Oh well, you were doing this, so I wasn't sure.
Oh, I totally oof. I want it. What would I be in actuality, or what would I like to be? What's the question?
So like if you weren't a musician, what would you be instead? Like let's say if I wasn't a guitar player or a drummer, I would be a tennis player, or I would be I don't know. It can be anything, that you may like or you enjoy, but you obviously dedicate more time to music.
Yeah, I'm gonna say without music as an outlet for me, the only chance I would have of survival is being a monk, someplace far away from like the perceived world and consensus reality, because it's like my mess. Yeah, I can't. Or maybe a garbage man, I guess.
So both practical in their own rights, in their own regards.
For me, I'm actually kind of trying to do both right now, because I'm going to school for psychology, and I am into psychology and just reading about philosophy, and I mean poetry is also kind of close to music, but that'd also be another domain that I'd probably my more expressive side.
Oh, nice.
But yeah, that's what it'd be for me probably. I would just go if I wasn't doing music, because my idea is I eventually want to study the psychology of music, what it does for us, and what's actually going on in us. That's a hugely interesting topic for me. So yeah, if I wasn't doing music, I would just go more into that.
So you'd be because Jim Morrison was obviously a really big poet. So you would be like Jim Morrison I should say you would be like a Sigmund Freud during day, and then you'd be like Jim Morrison at night.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. That's what I'm aiming for right now, man. I'm like, look, how can I learn about how people's brain works and then write music that makes it work better? Something like that.
maybe not being as grotesque as Sigmund Freud though, because he kind of had a lot of really bizarre ideas.
Yeah, probably more like Jung, actually. More like Carl Jung, actually, a little bit more.
Right.
But yeah.
Eric, how about you, bud?
I would say either an author or a stand-up comedian. I still kind of want to do both, and I still do both a little bit. I've still been writing comedy.
Oh, nice.
And I was going to Kalamazoo and a couple places around here to do open mics. But yeah, I think if I wasn't fully committed to music, I would just completely dive into either writing or being a stand-up comedian.
Wow, cool. I didn't know that about you. That's interesting.
I get
And
to
most
see you doing stand-up.
yeah, most musicians, they say if there's dead space, you have to be able to, talk to the audience and crack a joke. So that I'm glad to know that we found our comedian if that happens. Well, for me, I think it's hard because for the last good majority of my life here in this, in my, later teens and my early 20s here, it's like that's all I've been doing is music. So it's been it'd be really hard to make that transition. But for me, I think if I can't say exactly what it would be, but I know I'd want to be in the creative space somehow and showcasing it because beyond playing music and learning music and playing it is that's only half of the enjoyment for me. It's also presenting it to other people and showcasing it to other people and like trying to teach people about it as well. I really like being able to show the capabilities behind something. Like for me, when I look at the guitar, it's not just an instrument. I almost think of it as like a pencil, almost like an extension of myself, as if I'm like writing on a piece of paper, like a story, like I'm telling my musical story with it and I'm expressing it. So for me, it would be something probably in the artistic space as well, but I don't know maybe what that would be. Being a creator of some kind, whether that's, a creator in the regards of like an entrepreneur or something, although I don't see myself as a business person, but yeah, something in that regard. Yeah, wow, this is really cool. I really like this type of stuff too, because then I always really gain a lot of new perspective about everybody that's on, and I learn more about people and what makes them excited and what they're really into. So that's a lot of fun as well. All right, so I have a couple more questions here for you guys, and this is always kind of like a really funny story when I first encounter this with people, because we all have those first experience where it's like, well, what was the first instrument that you got? And you're like, oh, is this really crappy, $25 Goodwill guitar, Squire Bullet or whatever. And so I have a story of that, which we'll get to later, but I'd like everybody to talk about like, what was their first, instrument where they actually started like really practicing on it and started to learn the, the thing of music, whether that was guitar or drums or bass or whatever like that, the story behind it.
For me, it was my neighbor's, like it was a custom. It had like the body of a Fender, but it wasn't. It was his custom bass, and he just gave it to me. And so then I started taking lessons a couple weeks after that. So that was it for me.
Nice. So a neighbor had a guitar, and you just kind of did it. So did you like borrow it, or he got it for you, or?
I still have it in my room right now.
So you just basically he gave it to you on loan and he never got it?
No, he just gave it to me. He didn't even say He said I could keep it. He's like, you want it? And I was like, sure.
Oh, I thought it was like one of those like things where you go to like your friend's house and you see it like collecting dust in the corner and you're like, I could do that, and you just like take it and he never gets it back ever again.
It was either that or, like I said, my dad's drum set when he brought it out.
Cool. Greg, how about you, bud?
Yeah, me and my brother have pictures of us with this old acoustic guitar my dad literally found in a dumpster from before I even have, that memory. But the first, like you said, the first instrument I ever had that I like got serious about and practice on was, I believe it was about a $400 to $500 drum kit that I bought from Marshall Music here in lovely Lansing, Michigan. And I had that thing for quite a few years and got it to sound really good, obviously, when I got new hardware and cymbals. But yeah, so that was, like that little 1, 2, 3, 4 kit, man.
Wow, that's cool. What about you, Ben?
See, my first guitar was like, I don't even really count this one. I was like in 4th grade. It was from Toys R Us. I don't know if you heard that, like the Brann first act. It's like
Toys R Us.
Yeah, the first act, man.
Man had a Toys R Us guitar for his first guitar.
Was it like one of those ones that it was like it's a guitar, but it only has like 4 strings on it?
It was a legit guitar. It's just like really cheap, like $75. I'd say the first guitar I bought and like actually practiced on was this Epiphone Les Paul, like the $100 ones you get at a guitar center.
Yeah.
I was like, oh man, my first guitar was a Les Paul, and I didn't know.
He's like, it ain't the real one.
Feel cool. Yeah.
Like, well, shit. Yeah.
Yeah. What about you, Jake?
For me, it was so I'll give you a little story to put you in where I was. It was a Christmas morning, and so we had like a couple little presents, stockings under the tree and stuff, but it's just like little things. And then my parents like had me and my brother go down to the basement, and so we like go down the stairs and turn the corner, and there's this little like mini dirt bike thing right there. And I, being the older brother, immediately run over to it. I'm like, oh, this is so dope. Like, oh my God, cool. I love this. And then she's like, actually, that's for your brother. I'm like, oh, really? I was so bummed for a second. And then they're like, go around the corner. And I walked around the corner, and there's a red Sparkle Percussion Plus 5-piece drum set. There's like hi-hat, crash ride cymbal. And, you know, when you're a kid, you sit down, do that stuff. But that was it, man. It was so funny because I was like, oh, man, I didn't get that dirt bike. I was so ashamed. Why'd he get that? And then I got the drums. I didn't care about that at all anymore.
Dang, your parents are like super supporting and ambitious then, because
Yeah.
that's like a super noisy and loud like combinations.
I don't know. It's funny because that literally, like that moment basically like set us on the path we're on. Because here I am doing music now, and he's like working on cars and being a mechanic and driving four-wheelers and stuff. Like that literally like set us off. And definitely what my dad's doing, because that's like his two things, like motorcycles and rock and roll. And he's like, okay, my kids, you guys get my interest, go nuts.
Do with what you will.
Yeah.
Well, for me, it's so funny. So I had, I'll tell you the backstory first. So I had this teacher who was really, really into the Beatles, and he was a guitar player, and he was an English teacher. And during our lunch hours or whatever, when we had lunch, or after school for that matter, he'd always have his door closed. And he'd have this little like you know, like those little battery Vox amps, you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
He would have a guitar with him, and he would have this little amp, and he'd be sitting on a desk, and he would just be jamming like after school in between lunches. And I'd always walk down this hall, and I'd be like, what in the heck? You know, like what is all this ruckus, you know, whatever. Just a curious kid. And so one time I knocked on his door and I said, you know, what's ever? And then we started having this conversation about guitar. And that was like one of my first like moments into it. And then he was like, you know, you should consider learning the guitar. And so then that weekend, this happened during the school week. That weekend I went to, it's on Cedar Street. What's that music? Music Manor.
Music Manor.
Yeah, Music Manor. So I went to Music Manor and I bought the cheapest guitar acoustic pack that I could get. And it was like an Ibanez 100 series starter pack. You know, it wasn't even
Ivy.
Yeah, it was all, I still have that guitar. Actually, it's got holes drilled in it. I made a lamp out of it.
Oh, nice.
But yeah, so I still have that guitar. I'll send you guys a picture later of it. But yeah, that was a guitar that I really first learned everything on, and really started, really digging into the instrument. And so yeah, that was my. Oh, it looks like we have a visitor over at Erik's.
Hi.
Yeah, but that was my first guitar, an Ibanez starter series pack, and it had like the little flimsy case that it came in. It had like a string set that you could replace and string line. It was cool. Wow, lots of fun.
That was a good
stories.
question. I like that.
Yeah. So this is my last kind of question. We've reached a lot of different awesome topics here and talked a lot of cool things, and I really appreciate you guys being on. As far as like your biggest music supporter, and I know Jake, you kind of mentioned it with your father already, you kind of hinted at it a little bit. Who is, like if you were to say, this was my biggest supporter, whether it was my friend or, teacher, parent, mother, father, daughter, sister, whatever, what would that individual be that kind of, like fed your musical intuitions and, kind of said you should continue to do this?
I'll go.
Yeah, sure.
I would say my biggest monetary supporter would have to be my dad, making all the purchases, driving us to and from gigs before we had our driver's licenses,
Yeah.
But I would say on more of like a musical level would probably be my brother. Like we grew up together as musicians. He's just 2 years older than me. And so like, even when we weren't having formal band practice or playing shows, like, we were together listening to playing music like that. So, my whole family and a bunch of my friends were super into music and my music, but those two fellas there deserve an honorable mention.
Nice. Awesome to
Context.
hear that. Very cool. Erik?
Yeah, I guess similarly, my parents were my biggest monetary ones. They really supported me by helping me get all my instruments, my equipment, and all that stuff. But
Sure, yeah.
as far as like motivationally, I feel very lucky that everyone that I know personally has been very supportive. They all come to all of my shows. They all like follow me on social media, like listen to the music. So I feel very blessed to have a very supportive group of friends.
That's awesome. Really, really cool.
That's my roommate's fiance, Julia.
Oh, we just got Zoom bombed. Is that a new coin that we can not photo bomb, but
It
Zoom
has to be at
bomb?
this
I guess
point.
Zoom bombing is now a new thing.
Zoom bombing. Okay. Ben, how about you?
I guess like everyone else, they're just speaking like mom, like paying for my guitar lessons and stuff. Bought my first guitar over like my freshman summer. And then I'd say my brother, like, cause he's the one who like my older brother's the one who like introduced me to like rock and roll and Linkin Park and those types of bands. And it wasn't for him, I probably wouldn't have discovered rock and roll that early.
Yeah. Awesome. Big Brother Shark coming in clutch.
Baby shark doo doo.
Do. What about you, Jake? Oh, Ben, did you have something to say?
Yeah, what are we talking about? This shark stuff.
I don't know.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know what
Jake?
you're talking
Shark
about.
Week?
But, yeah, is it Shark Week? I don't know. But it was, like you said, it was, my dad more of like, just kind of lit the fire. Like he just kind of lit the match, kind of put the fire in me and then just let me off. Oh, through time though, I just had really, really good music teachers in school. Like my middle school band director was great.
Oh,
My
yeah.
high school band director was really great. And then if it wasn't for my drumline coach in high school, I probably wouldn't even know what discipline was. Like I wouldn't have any sense of like how to have like a disciplined practice with a met and going back when you mess up and like hammering it home. So yeah, my drumline coach Kim in high school, like she was the one that really just made it clear like you got to take it seriously. Like if you actually love music, like you got to put your whole self into it, and you actually have to treat it like work because it is work, and you do love it, and it pays off, but you do have to put in the work.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome to hear that everybody's kind of got like their own support system of their family and friends. It's awesome to hear. I would imagine that it'd be really hard to try to do music without the necessary support because it is such a creative, outlook on things and just, putting yourself out there. Definitely for me would be definitely my folks, obviously, as well. They, always made sure that they'd come to every single, show and stuff like that when I was doing things, recitals and whatnot. And definitely my English teacher as well. Like I had to definitely give him kudos for, really kind of exposing me to the guitar because I remember like you hear guitar and you witness it via video on YouTube and stuff as a young kid, but you never actually experience it firsthand where you see someone playing. And so as like a young kid to see this, he was pretty young at the time. I would say he's in his 30s. To see him ripping through this instrument and creating all these sounds was just like I've never witnessed that firsthand before, other than being at like a concert and being in a nosebleed seat, so you never actually get to sit in front and kind of see that. So it was super, super cool. Well, guys, I'd like to thank everybody for being on the Just Music podcast. This has been a lot of fun. So I'd like to thank Greg, Erik, Ben, and Jake. This has been a really, really good time. And does anybody have some closing remarks they'd like to say or anything before we close out here?
Can I shamelessly plug my YouTube channel?
Yeah,
No.
for sure. Yeah, so that's fine. I'll make sure to have everybody's links in the description. So you guys should definitely give them a check out on whether that be their YouTube via Instagram or whatever, media stuff that they have in the link. So definitely make sure to check those out in the description. But yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, the link will be down there. I just got a couple originals, some blues songs, some folk songs, just whatever I'm feeling at the time. Been doing a couple more because I've just been stuck at home, so.
Sure, yeah. Anybody else?
I just want to say support your local musicians during this unparalleled time, I want to say, at least for people who are still alive today. Support your local musicians. When they go live, Venmo them $1.
Yeah.
At least, right?
Yeah.
Maybe
$1.50.
$3.50.
Yeah.
Up to fitty, yeah.
Eric, Ben.
No, nothing else to add, really.
All right. Ben, how about you, bud?
I guess you can follow me on Instagram.
All right.
description.
Yeah, he's at the real shark fin. I'm just kidding. All right, well, thanks a lot, guys. I really do appreciate it. This has been a lot of fun. Maybe we can do this again in the future and do a part 2 or something like that.
Yeah. Thanks
Thanks
for
for
putting
having
this
us,
together.
great.
This is
man.
All right, you guys, take care now.
Dissolve.
All right.
All right, guys, that was the episode. I hope you really enjoyed it. I always have a lot of fun interviewing all the special guests that are on the Just Music podcast. Make sure that you check the playlist down below in the description so that you can check out the other episodes on the Just Music podcast, and I'll see you in the next episode. Take care.